There is a kind of obedience that makes no sound. It is not the obedience of the hero who raises his sword on the battlefield. It is not the faith celebrated in songs. It is something else, quieter, heavier, and almost impossible to sustain alone. It is the obedience of one who receives an order that breaks the heart from within, and yet he obeys. Ezekiel knew this, not as a concept, as lived experience, in the body, in mourning, in enforced silence, in years spent lying on the ground while the people around him did not want to listen. He was not called to a ministry of glory. He was called to be a sign. And sometimes being a sign of God costs everything a man has. If you have ever felt the weight of carrying something others do not understand, a word nobody wants to hear, a pain you had to swallow in silence, a faith that seemed to find no answer, then Ezekiel's story is not merely biblical history, it is a mirror. But there is a question that runs through his whole life and that this video will answer. What happens to someone who carries God's burden so long in such absolute silence that even hope seems to have dried up? The answer is in a valley, and the bones that lay there were many and very dry. Before we get there, we need to understand who this man was, because Ezekiel did not appear out of nowhere. He came from a specific place, was torn from a specific calling, and taken into exile that changed everything, including the way God speaks to the world. What this prophet lived will say something to you that perhaps no other character in the Bible can say in the same way. To understand what was happening with Ezekiel, you have to understand what was happening with Israel. King Nebuchadnezzar of Babylon had marched against Jerusalem and deported part of the people, priests, leaders, artisans, in one of the early waves of captivity before the temple was finally destroyed. Israel was not free, it was broken, and those who were taken far from the promised land carried with them the question no priest knew how to answer. If God dwelled in that temple, what happened to those who lived on the other side of loss? Ezekiel was one of them. He was not in the center of the city. He was among the captives by the river Chebar, far from the temple, far from Jerusalem, far from everything a priest should have touched with his own hands. And there, precisely there, the word of the Lord came to Ezekiel, the son of Buzi, the priest, in the land of the Chaldeans. The scene is unassuming, but it carries the weight of an entire ruin. Jerusalem's name still existed. The temple was still a living memory. But the man called to serve before God already lived on the other side of loss, among those who had been taken, displaced, torn from their land, as if the calling had arrived too late or too early to prevent the pain. Ezekiel does not appear crowned nor surrounded by a crowd. He appears in exile, and that changes everything. Because a priest without an altar carries a wound no one can see from the outside. His natural place had been interrupted. His vocation had been surrounded by silence. And what is left for a man like that when history drives him away from his own name? Even so, the hand of the Lord was upon him, not on the palace, not on the victors, upon the captive, upon the man who now lived where there was only memory and waiting.
There is something severe and at the same time intimate in that choice. God does not call him from comfort, he calls him from loss. And perhaps that is exactly why his voice would become so heavy to hear. Because exile did not merely take Ezekiel far from the land, it brought him closer to the truth. There, among the captives, the prophet would learn that Israel's story could no longer be told as before. Judgment was coming. Glory was not confined to stones, and the man who seemed too displaced to serve would be placed at the center of a revelation that began where everything seemed to have ended. But if he was called there, in that setting of loss, what exactly was God about to show this priest who had been torn from his place? And why would the answer begin with wind, fire, and living creatures?
Then the heavens were opened, not over a king, not over a sanctuary, over a man among the captives by the river Chebar. And what came before his eyes did not seem to belong to the earth. A storm wind came out of the north, a great cloud moved with fire within it, and a brightness surrounded it. Out of that flame came 4 living creatures with the appearance of a man, yet not limited to the form of a man. They had faces turned in different directions. They had wings. They had feet that shone like polished brass. And there was a wheel beside a wheel, as if all creation had begun to move according to an order man could not measure. Nothing in that scene was ordinary. Everything was awe-inspiring. Everything was alive. The living creatures moved without turning aside, and the sound of their wings was like the noise of many waters, like the voice of the Almighty, like the tumult of a great army. Everything seemed to declare that the God of Israel was not bound by distance, nor by captivity, nor by what men called the end. Above the firmament there was something like a sapphire throne, and upon the throne the likeness as the appearance of a man. Is this not how fear begins to dissolve? The prophet does not first see an explanation. He first sees holiness. He first sees the excess of glory. He first sees what causes him to fall to the ground. Ezekiel did not remain standing. He fell on his face, for when the glory of the Lord is revealed, the body learns before the mind does. Exile had not diminished God. The Chebar had not limited his presence. The throne remained in glory, and the brightness around it was like the bow that appears in the cloud on the day of rain. Was there peace in that vision? Not in a human way. There was weight, there was fire, there was majesty enough to silence all pride. And within it all, there was a terrible and comforting certainty. The Lord still saw. The Lord still moved. The Lord still spoke. And if his glory had reached Ezekiel there, among the captives, what else should he expect from that God? The answer came soon after. But before the mission was given, the man needed to learn who was speaking to him.
Then that voice lifted him from the ground. Son of man, stand upon thy feet, and I will speak unto thee. And when he spoke, the Spirit entered into Ezekiel and set him upon his feet. The vision that had brought him down did not destroy him, it prepared him. The same God who had filled the heavens with glory now steadied him before a mission that would not be light. The word came without softness. He would be sent to the children of Israel, to a rebellious nation, stiff of face and stubborn of heart. This was not a commission for applause. It was a commission for faithfulness. Whether they would hear or whether they would forbear, they would know that a prophet had been among them.
There is an unusual severity in that calling, and there is also mercy. For God does not send him to overcome the people's resistance in human strength. He sends him to testify to the truth in the midst of refusal. The weight of the calling was not in convincing, it was in remaining. Then came the scroll. A hand was stretched out before him, and in it was a book. It was written within and without, and what was written there were lamentations, mourning, and woe. There was no ornament in that writing. There was sentence, there was sorrow. There was the kind of word no one desires to receive, yet must be proclaimed. And Ezekiel ate the scroll. It was not merely a symbolic act for the scene. It was a total taking in of the message. The word entered him before it came out of his mouth, and when he tasted it, it was sweet as honey. Sweet, though it spoke of lamentation. Sweet, though it announced judgment. Such mysteries exist in the biblical story, and this is one of them. The messenger tastes the sweetness of obedience, even when the message is bitter to the ears of those who receive it. But the sweetness did not remove the cost. The Lord sent him to the captives and made his forehead hard as adamant, harder than flint. His tongue would cleave to the roof of his mouth. He would be mute when there was no word from the Lord, and he would speak only when the Lord opened his mouth. It was not permanent silence, it was obedient silence. The prophet who received the word could not use it whenever he wished. As though God were marking that man's whole body with his own authority. What else could it mean to serve such a God? And how long would Ezekiel's silence last before the next command came?
The word did not remain only on his lips. It came down to the ground. And there, in the strangest act a prophet could perform before a people's eyes, Ezekiel received a brick. Jerusalem was engraved on it. Then came the siege, trench, camp, fortification, an image of a city under assault before the sword actually arrived. It was not an empty performance, it was a visible warning. The prophet set before the people what they were not yet able to hear. The city that thought it would remain secure was already surrounded in the world of the Word, and while everyone could still pretend the danger had no name, the sign stood there, unmoving before them. Then Ezekiel's body became the time of judgment. He lay on his left side, and there he bore the days appointed for the iniquity of Israel. Then he turned onto his right side, carrying the days of Judah. 390 days on one side, 40 on the other, a day for a year. The man was not merely speaking about guilt, he was carrying it in silence for stretches far too long for any human haste. There is a kind of burden that does not end with words. Ezekiel felt it in his body. The message stretched over his flesh, as though the Lord wanted to show Israel that rebellion does not go unnoticed. Idolatry, injustice, alliance with pagan nations, all that the people had exchanged for the presence of God. Heaven was not distracted. Heaven was counting the days. Then came the sharp knife. He shaved his head and beard. The hair was divided. One part was burned in the fire in the midst of the city. Another was struck with the sword around it. Another was scattered to the wind, and only a few strands were kept in the edges of his garment. Nothing there was random. Everything spoke of dispersion, devastation, and a tiny, trembling remnant of restoration. The prophet who had once received the scroll now became in his own body a map of what was coming upon Jerusalem.
Every enacted gesture was both an accusation and a foreshadowing, and it was not only the city that was exposed. The depth of the rupture between the people and the God who had called them was exposed as well. Judgment had already begun, first in the vision, then in the flesh. But if the prophet's body could carry so much, what else remained to be borne? And when the sign became irreparable loss, who could still remain standing before it?
If this story has already weighed on your chest, take a quick pause with us here on the channel. Your like and your subscription help this space keep telling stories that do not soften the truth, but reveal it faithfully.
Then came the word no man wants to hear. Son of man, behold, I take away from thee the desire of thine eyes with a stroke. There was no detour. There was not enough preparation to soften it. Ezekiel's wife would die, and the command that came with the news was even harder. He was not to mourn, nor weep, nor make any visible sign of grief. That very morning, or in the silence that surrounded it, the house was filled with an absence greater than the presence it had lost. Ezekiel stood before God, but also before the simplest and most terrible human abyss, losing the one who was his, losing without being able to protest, losing under command. Some sorrows arrive like a storm. This one arrived like a sentence. When the people saw him act without the expected mourning, they asked him what it meant, and the answer revealed the weight of the scene. So would the pride of the sanctuary fall, the support of the city, the desire of Israel's eyes. What was breaking in Ezekiel's inner life was a mirror of what would break among those who still thought themselves secure. And he remained silent, not because there was no pain, but because the pain had already been taken up as a sign. Ezekiel's silence was not empty, it was part of the message. He did not weep before men, because Jerusalem's ruin was coming in such a way that private lament would be swallowed up by a greater lament, deeper and more collective. There is something profound in that obedience. The prophet is not allowed to turn his own loss into a spectacle. He bears it in secret, under the hand of God, while the people watch and ask. And in that forced silence, his soul becomes even heavier than the word he carries. But the God who struck would also lead him to the next vision. For when all human comfort falls silent, the word is not yet finished. And if the heart of the prophet has been torn open without relief, what hope could still be born from that? The hand of the Lord took him again. Ezekiel was brought in vision to a valley full of bones. There were no traces of recent life there, no signs of haste, no memory of strength. There were many bones, and they were very dry. It was as though time had passed over them without mercy and without return. Then came the question, Son of man, can these bones live? Ezekiel did not answer like a man trying to explain the impossible. He answered like one who had already learned not to contend with God. O Lord God, thou knowest. The question was not a provocation, it was an abyss set before him. The command was to speak, and he prophesied over the bones. While he was still speaking, there was a noise. The bones came together, bone to his bone. Sinews, flesh, and skin came upon them, but there was still no breath in them. The miracle began in structure, but did not end in life, and that alone was enough to hold the scene suspended.
Then the Lord commanded him to prophesy to the wind. And the breath came in, breath returned. The house of Israel had already said that their bones were dry and their hope was lost. But the word of God did not treat them as a closed case. The valley, once an open grave, became a summons, and the one who seemed to be speaking to nothing now saw an entire army rise before him. There is almost an unbearable force in this vision, because it does not merely promise some relief, it announces restoration where there was no way to expect it. This is not about masking ruin, it is about God calling life where only death existed. The prophet who had lost his wife in silence, who had carried his body as a map of judgment, who had spoken to a stubborn people for years, that man now stood before an army that had been dust. And the question moving through the valley was not only for Israel, it was for any soul that has ever felt its hope dry up completely. If a valley of dry bones can rise at the sound of the Lord's word, what could still remain dead before him? And there was still an answer Ezekiel needed to see. Not only bones that come back to life, but where, after all, would the life that sustains all this come from?
A river came out of the house of God. It began small, almost unnoticed, water to the ankles, then to the knees, then to the loins, but it advanced until it became too deep to cross. And wherever it flowed, everything came alive. The salty and dead waters became healthy, fish appeared in abundance, and trees grew along the banks with leaves that did not wither and fruit that served as food and as medicine. The vision was not decorative. It was the definitive answer to the question the exile had raised. Where is God when the temple falls? Ezekiel 47 answers that the presence of God is not contained by stones. It flows, it advances, it turns what was dead into fertile ground. The Christian tradition has always recognized in that stream an image the New Testament would later take up with precision. When Jesus, on the last day of the feast, said that rivers of living waters would flow from within the one who believes, he was speaking to ears that knew Ezekiel. The promise did not point only to an outward miracle. It pointed to a life that begins to flow from the inside out, because the source is no longer in a temple of stone, but in God's dwelling among his people. And the same thread appears at the end of the Bible. In Revelation, there is again a river of the water of life, clear as crystal, proceeding from the throne of God and the Lamb. And beside it stands the tree of life with leaves for the healing of the nations. Students of biblical theology point there to a convergence that is no literary accident. Lost Eden, the profaned temple, the valley of dry bones, and the restored city are images pointing to the same destiny, where the presence of God and full life are never separated. That is why Ezekiel does not end in ruin, he ends in flow. The God who came to the prophet in exile is the God who restores the heart, the people, and the land. And what comes from his throne is not only power, it is life that conquers death. First in a valley, now in a river that never runs dry.
Ezekiel ended as he began, with God speaking where no one expected to hear a voice at all. In exile, in mourning, in silence and in ruin, In each of these places, the Lord revealed himself present, sovereign, and impossible to confine within the boundaries men draw for him. This was not a story of a hero who defeated his enemies. It was the story of a man who remained and discovered that remaining, when God sustains it, is enough to change everything. The question that opened this video was this: what happens to someone who carries God's burden for so long in such absolute silence that even hope seems to have dried up? Ezekiel's life answers, God does not abandon those who carry his burden in silence. He comes, he speaks, he shows bones that live and rivers that heal what has been dead for a long time. And when he acts, what seemed like the end reveals itself to be only the place where the story had not yet begun. Perhaps that is why Ezekiel still speaks so powerfully today. Not because of the strange visions, not because of the unsettling images, but because he knew before anyone else the answer to the most honest question a human being can ask in the face of pain. Is God still here? The answer came in a valley, and the bones there were many and very dry, and they lived. If you are in that valley today, if your hope feels dry, if the silence weighs more than you expected, Ezekiel's story was not told for Israel alone. It was told for you too.